Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
It's fine. You know, sometimes the technical stuff doesn't work the way you want it to. So it's not as seamless and smooth as we usually like to have it. But here we are, Dan and Eric, doing a live stream tonight. First one of these in a while. Won't be the last one this month. In fact, just a programming note, I will be live streaming all throughout the first round again this year. But lessons learned, will not be getting a copyright strike, will not be sharing. Will not be getting banned from live streaming for 90 days because I showed the NFL's draft stream. I will have that in the background, so not to worry. Erik Briggs, our Arizona correspondent. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. And then we have all sorts of stuff going on. We're going to talk draft tonight. We're going to talk about some of our favorite guys. We're going to take questions and comments. And in the background, I even have a little Mariner game going. They got bases loaded right now with one out in the fourth, up 4-2. So, yeah. Another baseball note. Just when we thought maybe the Astros aren't going to be good this year, they get off to an 0-4 start. Did you see what they just did?
I'm not talking about it.
Their fifth starter throws a no-hitter.
I know.
All right. So let's just get right into this. It's we talked about it right before we went live. Like it's a whole new world, right? I'm not going to sing the song. I'm going to spare you all that. But it is a whole new world. We don't quite know how John Schneider is going to operate drafting for a new coaching staff. We don't know exactly what kinds of players McDonald's looking for. We can try to glean from what he did in Baltimore or even what he did at Michigan. Now that you've had a couple of months to sit with this and kind of study this draft and connect the dots and listen to all the interviews and all that stuff, what's your general feel as we head into the draft about how they're going to approach this?
I think that, honestly, they answer a lot of questions so far in the free agency period to give us at least a little bit of a glean of what they're thinking, the type of players, where they're focusing. And then that obviously would be like, oh, well, now through the draft and then, afterwards, June 1st cuts, that maybe we start to get an idea of the positions they need to address and then what type of players that we think they're looking for scheme-wise, athletic ability, etc. So I think this draft for them is going to be amazing. And the reason why I say that is I feel like they did such a great job in the last couple drafts and then this round of free agency, addressing some of those positional needs that we all knew were there, that they're like, hey, we're going to build this the right way so it's sustainable. It's a contender year in, year out. We're not going to do the New Orleans Saints and, have our salary cap pushed out 4 years and then crush us for the next decade. Or I think they're going to do it the right way. I would not be surprised if some of the positions we think are, already solid, or you wouldn't put a lot of draft capital in as far as using your early round picks, that they won't absolutely go there and do that and take a position that is good or a strength and just make it better or stronger. I would not be surprised. And I think cornerback would be the number one spot. I would not be surprised if the right guy's there at 16 or if the right guy's there and they could slide down and maybe pick up some picks in the third, fourth, maybe second, but that's kind of a stretch. That if they know that the guy they're looking for, top of their draft board, they're focused on cornerback. I wouldn't be surprised. The only position that would surprise me at this point would be running back. That would be the only one based off what we know about the coaches, both Donald and the offensive coordinator. That would be the only one that I would be truly surprised. But again, if that is the player that they absolutely have targeted, and that's what's going to help get this, moving in the right direction and this franchise, built to sustain, a high level of success, I won't be mad. I'll be surprised.
I think they would riot. I think fans would. There's that scene from Draft Day, that movie with Kevin Costner, where they had traded down and Bo Callahan starts to fall, and the fans are all pissed off that they traded out of the first pick, and he looks out, Sonny Weaver, Costner's character goes, I know the fans, there's a lot of unrest there, and the GM, the guy that's playing the Seahawks GM, looks out the window and they're all like gathering outside the chain link signs and shit. And I think that would look, all kidding aside, we're fortunate this year in that we don't have a second round pick, and that's where we usually like to take running backs. And also it's a really bad running back draft. And so I think we're in the clear, but listen, you make a good point, because anyone who watches my show, and certainly you and I know this about each other, I consider all possibilities. And it occurred to me the other day, I'm thinking, best player available, best player available, best player available. Well, there's a couple of position groups in this draft that are considered extremely strong. One of them is cornerback, but it kind of falls in after quarterback, tackle, and receiver. So there's going to be runs on those guys. And some of these corners that are really highly graded, guys like Terrion Arnold and Cooper DeJean and some of those guys that fit. I saw a Devin Witherspoon comp today for Terrion Arnold, which that has to appeal to the Seahawks. Cooper DeJean's a guy that can play any position in the defensive backfield. That has to appeal to Mike McDonald. They might look up at their board if they trade back, especially, and there's a corner at the top of the board, and fans will freak because they think we're set there. But it's a good example of what you're talking about, that they're going to be focused on taking good players no matter what.
Yeah. And I think that, again, only because we don't know yet, because, they've gotten, into training camp, and we're starting to get those reports of, guys that are already on the roster, Derek Hall, Mike Morris, is like people like that. What is their view? What is their, opinion of those players and how much they can contribute or not? So in their mind, they don't feel that, hey, grabbing an edge or grabbing, another D lineman or whatever position we're talking about is nearly important, right? Because they feel like we've already got that guy on the roster,
And next week's their first, they start their official OTAs a week from today. And so that's really the first opportunity for these players to make first impressions. And there's guys with a lot of riding on this. Like Darrell Taylor needs to make a good first impression, out on the field, running around.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And maybe they don't. And maybe there's a couple of players that after a couple of weeks of workouts, the coaching staff thinks, I don't know if that's a fit, or at least not something that can't be replaced either in the draft or undrafted free agency or the, third or fourth wave of free agency after the draft, that, we can save $3 million by cutting him,
sure.
Or trading him on day 3 potentially for recoup a pick, because that edge class this year really, really drops off after the second or third round. There may be a market for Darrell Taylor on day 3, and based on what they see over the next couple of weeks at VMAC, it could go a long way to determining how they feel about a player like that.
Absolutely.
Before we talk about the draft, I think this sort of exemplifies what you're talking about, that we really don't know. And I think the one position that everybody's still a little nervous about is guard. And, there are reports, and there have been for the last week or so, and Schneider kind of fanned these flames himself by saying, hey, we're going to meet with some veteran guards after the owners' meetings. And then today, Jeremy Fowler reported that they have interest in Laken Tomlinson, the former first-round pick, and Cody Whitehair, the former second-round pick, who started his career as a center and then played guard for the Bears, has made a Pro Bowl. And they're both. The thing I like about both these guys are both street free agents. They were released, so they wouldn't count against the comp formula at all.
Yep.
But they're very different players. Like Tomlinson's a 330-pound dude that's a mauler, built more like Anthony Bradford. Whitehair's 305 and it is more of a mover. Like, do you want to see them sign a veteran? Obviously, it all depends on the money and the contract or whatever. Or would you rather see them target a plug-and-play guy in the draft?
I definitely would like to see them sign a veteran. At this point, you've got a young center if Oluwatomi ends up being the starter at center. You've got 2 young tackles, and Lucas lost a year last year, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think getting some veteran experience and leadership, at least at one of the guard positions, I think would be the best case scenario to continue our young guys' development and not basically have a throwaway year because you have, a lot of problems with young players at any position. But I would then add on, but I'd also like to see him grab a plug and play guy as well. And I'd like to see competition there. Right.
Yeah.
And
it kind of reminds me of where we were last year at this time with the defensive tackles, right? The interior defensive line. It was like, they flushed out that whole group. They signed Draymond Jones and Jaron Reed in free agency. You're like, okay. But by the time the draft rolled around, we felt like we had to find guys that could be in the rotation because they didn't add enough. I kind of feel like that's where we're at with guard right now.
I think that's a really good, comparison. I mean, maybe Tomlinson, maybe they did talk to him, maybe they didn't. That one I find a stretch. I don't see us, going after a mauler that can't at least be competent in our scheme, whether it's the wide or just a regular zone scheme, because that's the rest of your line for the most part. Like they're very athletic, mobile people, and to have someone that doesn't have that, I don't know how that would work. Maybe it does. I don't know how it would though. Right.
Yeah. If the thing that would concern me, I guess, if they were to sign Tomlinson, obviously depending on the money, both of these guys might be in a position where they can't command any guaranteed money. So it could be a situation where we sign them to a 1-year deal, but they have to make the team, right? Or it doesn't really cost us any salary cap money. If they were to choose Tomlinson over Whitehair, my concern would be that they're not that high on Anthony Bradford. They don't think he fits the scheme or can take that next step. Because the thing I like about Whitehair is he can play center and guard. He could kind of be this year's Evan Brown. I know they signed Nick Harris and he played for Scott Huff, but he's 290 pounds. Like we went through the Joey Hunt.
Yeah.
Right.
Oof.
And, those guys are just, I don't know. I'd like to see bigger dudes.
Yeah. I'd like to see him talk to, Zeitler. I know he's 34, but look at the Rams, what they got out of the left tackle, Whitford.
Zeitler went to Detroit.
Oh, did he? Oh, I missed that.
Yeah, he did.
What about Connor Williams? Is he still out there?
Connor Williams is still available. Yep. And he's a guy that he's coming off an injury. There was a guy that I forgot about. He's coming off an ACL. And so he probably wouldn't be ready to start the season. But I was reading some opinion pieces the last 2 days. He's a guy that might have a higher ceiling than these other two that if they're willing to sit on him, he could be a legitimate starter.
Yeah.
A guy that a lot was expected out of it as a tackle, and they ended up having to move him inside because he was disappointing. But you'd have to wait on him a little bit, but he's still out there. And then the other guy is Dalton Reisner.
I was just gonna bring him up. Yeah. I think again, youngish. He's 29. Started at Denver, and then I think it was Minnesota right last year, and he was part of that line. Right. Yeah.
So signed right before camp again. Could only get a 1-year deal. It's kind of a weird deal with him because he grades out well. I got it wrong the other day. I think he's elite as a run blocker, not as a pass protector. It's the other way around. I can't remember which one, but he's not a well-rounded guard, but he moves well.
Yeah.
And then the other guy that I thought was interesting that actually of all these free agent guards, I think finished the highest on PFF's overall grade last year, and that's our old friend Mark Glowinski. who's another guy who's a street free agent, wouldn't count against the comp formula, 32 years old, same age as Whitehair and Tomlinson. It doesn't seem like there's any reported interest there, but there's options which can only help because it'll just, thin out those guys market. And we should be able to get one of those guys cheap, I would think, but they're going to have to move some money around somehow still, because technically as we sit here today, according to Over the Cap, they're over the cap when it comes to effective cap space. They don't have any money right now.
Yeah. Once you set aside for the draft and everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's definitely going to be some more roster moves for sure for money.
And they probably either already know what they're going to do, or some of these contracts, some of these levers they can pull. They don't have to get the players' permission, like with the Geno Smith deal. It's just built in.
Yeah.
Some players, Russell Wilson, they had to get his approval to do it. When they did that the 1 year, but be interesting to see. Let's check in on. Let's see here. Okay, where'd they go? There they are. Comments, questions. Blue and green zone. Pretty happy they're the first one in. Robin Solari says lots of background noise. There's kids, dogs. There's a lot going on over at
my bad.
Place. I got a house full of cats, so it's quiet here. But but if you haven't done it, go to my Twitter timeline at Seahawks Forever and look at the video I posted today of how it's not always safe to have cats around when you're trying to record a show. I was recording an intro for one of the shows I recorded today, and one of the cats jumped up into my lap, and I thought, oh, he's and I got smacked in the face. So it turned out pretty good. Let me see. Blue and Green Zone says, I hope they utilize Kenny McIntosh. I mean, if he's healthy, I think he would have had a role last year, don't you? It's just that he got hurt in camp.
He definitely, I think that affected him getting hurt in camp. I think the other thing was at a certain point in the season, with how much Charbonnet stepped up and really produced, and became a third down back, for all intents and purposes, that it was hard. It was hard for them to risk, getting others involved at that point because a lot of things just weren't working. But that Zach Charbonnet rushing the ball, catching the ball out of the backfield was working. Yeah. So maybe that also had an effect on his playing time or how much playing time they thought they could risk.
Well, and they trusted Dallas so much in pass protection.
Yes.
That he had a pretty firm hold on that third spot, but he moved on. Didn't he sign with Arizona? He's down there now, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So turncoat, whatever, DJ. But but no, I don't think they were going to spend any kind of significant money to bring him back when they knew they had McIntosh in the fold. I think he's firmly the number 3 guy this year.
Yeah.
And a guy that we'll see, on passing downs and, take a carry here and there.
Absolutely.
So wonder if they would, let's put this one up here. Wonder if they'd trade a 4th round pick and Taylor to move up to the middle of the 3rd. Now that's interesting. So when I first read this over in the column, I thought they were saying, hey, we could trade Taylor for a 3rd. I think that's a little rich. I do think that there may be a market for Taylor on day 3 because he's a guy with some explosion. He's a guy with some upside. He's a guy who's had some production. He may be more of a specialized player, but depending on team and scheme, this edge class, after the middle of the 2nd round, it vanishes. Yeah. There aren't a lot of guys with legitimate upside. And, maybe a Darrell Taylor gets a 3rd day pick in a draft that some teams consider to be weak on day 3.
Yeah. And of course, you always have to put the caveat out there where they're talking about what we think we're going to pick or what potential moves other teams would be willing to make in a draft. I mean, we got to see how the draft unfolds, right? You got to see, did people slide or, as a position group, have a heavy run on it sooner than some people thought. And so now they panic that their guy might not be there, in the zone they wanted. So they might make a move to secure him. Right.
Yeah.
So again, I mean, all in the eye of the beholder, right? Does someone look at taking our fourth and Taylor worthy enough to go from, the 140s or 150s into the, hundreds? I don't know. Like that's all in the eye of the beholder at that point.
It's a creative idea. It's interesting. I would like that, something like that, as opposed to having fewer picks, like trading both of our thirds to get up, or both of our fourths to get up into the third or something like that, to take, one player that we zero in on. It's,
I would say the more realistic scenario for us to get our picks, the number of our picks to increase is more than likely moving down from 16 to the end of the first, and either getting a second rounder that would be at the end of the second round, or if the team did have a high third round, then that's probably the more realistic scenario. You just don't see a lot of draft day trades that include players. More times than not, it's picks for picks, whether it's future picks or swapping later round or whatever. The player involved trades, that's the very small portion of draft day trades for sure.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think we're seeing more player trades than we did previously, but they seem to happen before the draft.
Yeah, exactly.
DJ Moore was involved in that deal last year between Carolina and the Bears, and here's another one. Blue and Green Zone. McIntosh should be good in the screen game and that kind of stuff. And then someone else says, wait, where was it? What's a screen game? How long have we, just been pulling our hair out, trying to figure out, it doesn't matter who the coordinator is, who the coach is, that the Seahawks haven't been very good at running screens. UW was, do you have some hope that Ryan Grubb might finally be able to fix that?
Actually, I wanted to bring that up to you in the last podcast, that one of the areas I felt that very confident that we're going to see us be better. I'm not sure how much better, but it's not hard to be better than what we've done the last 5, 6, 7 years. I do think we're going to see, whether it's the wide receivers or tight ends or running backs, I do think we're going to see a much more intricate and successful screen game, just based off of what we saw out of him as an offensive coordinator, right? Like that seemed to be one of his staples, and they executed it very well at UW.
Yeah.
And, that's coaching, that's player execution, that's all, the whole package.
Yeah.
And I think they executed their screen game very well. It was very effective.
I had Brandon Kane of the Hawks Nest on Friday, and we were talking about this, and he brought up the point that he thinks kind of one of the underrated aspects of that part of their offense is that they just haven't had good enough, mobile enough, athletic enough guards to pull that off. That Damian Lewis just could not, wasn't the right fit, or a guy that you wanted out there having to move his feet and get out into the flat to lead a screen. And certainly Anthony Bradford on the other side didn't really fit that mold either, or Phil Haynes. That, that might be one of the reasons why they're targeting more athletic guards.
Which again goes back to why I'm confused about the Tomlinson interest. That would be completely opposite of that.
Let's see. We'll check back in on these in a minute, but we said we would talk about some of our favorite guys, right?
Yes.
So let's talk first round exclusively first, then we'll talk about some other kind of unsung guys later. Give me a name or two of guys that you'd be comfortable taking if they stick at 16, just because you like them so much.
Obviously, we talked about him last time, Fonalawa, or however you pronounce it, the guard out of UW.
Yeah,
I would love that.
I've heard it pronounced like 5 times. Some people just make it into 2 syllables. I think it's Fautanu.
Fautanu, that's right. Sorry,
Fautanu. I hear a lot too. So, the UW kid.
Yes. Very interested in both the Iowa cornerback and the Alabama cornerback that have the length and have the speed and the fluidity that we've seen out of Witherspoon. If those guys are there, yeah, I would very interested. So those would be the three. I've kind of now written off the quarterbacks because I kind of feel like we found our quarterback in Sam Howell. That I don't think that's really something they're going to target again, unless the draft falls a certain way. And, you know, one of their guys is there, JJ McCarthy or whoever it is that they're in love with.
Yeah.
Then yes, I'd still be okay with that pick. Right. But I think by getting Howell with how young he is and taking the pressure off him and letting him sit and learn and develop, I kind of feel like we have drafted our quarterback.
I agree. You know, I've talked about it a lot on the show in the last week or so, just because it's being talked about out there. Like the experts won't stop talking about it, and so it remains relevant. I do hope that it doesn't go that way. Like I hope that the draft doesn't fall a certain way to where they're like, I could just see being a fly on the wall in the war room if they trade back, the guys that they really want get sniped. Penix falls to them and they go, God damn it. The top of our board and
how can we not?
Like they're kind of they're like, come on, please take him, so that we don't have to face that. Just because I've been all about trying to trade back and pick up picks, but there's a couple guys in this draft, and one in particular, and I'm with you. It's Fautanu. If he's there at 16, and some people think he won't be, that because he's tested so well, he proved himself to be so athletic and longer arms than teams thought, and so could play tackle. That I just think he's the one guy in this draft in that range that if they take him, I'm just celebrating. That's a starter. That's a long-term star. That's a foundational piece. For one, you don't even have to worry about. So that's one for me. If they do trade back, I have a 1B that almost fits a similar profile as Fautanu, and that's Graham Barton from Duke.
Yes. Yeah.
He's so close athletically. In fact, you know, Fautanu, when you look at the relative athletic scores, he's considered a tackle, so he's rated against those guys. Graham Barton scored a 9.98 in his RAS score. The third best score of all time since 1987, since they started doing that scoring. And the only yellow he has on his chart is his weight. And so I joked today, he's 6'5", 313. I joked today on Twitter that, like, how many cheeseburgers does he have to eat to get a perfect score? To get to 10, because 313 is what he played at. You know, he played left tackle at Duke. He's not going to play. He's not going to play tackle. But I like the fact that he could someday. But he's another guy that I think if you miss out on Fautanu, especially if you trade back, you know, I'm taking him and I'm starting him at left guard from day one.
I agree. Yeah.
Let's go back to the questions, comments. Let's see what we got here, because we got quite a few. Oh, hey, look at that. Someone was a step ahead of me. Screen. That's why a lot of people like Fautanu. Someone here saying McIntosh was still the steal of that draft, in my opinion. We didn't get a chance to see that, but I think we will. I just really think. Here's one. Do you think they'll utilize DK and his speed, get more out of him with Grubb's offense?
Well, I guess, you know, are we looking at getting the ball in his hands early and letting that speed, you know, come in the yak, you know, because that's one way to utilize his speed. You know, some of those routes where we clear people out and he comes across the middle, you know, quick hitters, you know, that can be one way. If they're talking about speed as far as stretching the field, we saw both out of the UW offense last year.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think that compared to last season between JSN and DK, I think we will see a lot more creative formations and route combos to utilize their natural athletic ability. I do think that that's something that we will see from Grubb.
I saw speculation the other day that it's a priority for Schneider, that John Schneider really wants to get more out of DK Metcalf and might not think that we have up till this point. You think about the kind of routes that he had Roma Dunze running at you,
yeah.
you know, and
part of keeping DK engaged and happy and not a distraction and emotionally disrupting the team would be to get him more touches and utilize him, you know, to where it feeds into that part of his personality that, you know, he's being valued at the level he thinks he should be, right?
And what's the thing we keep hearing about Ryan Grubb is that he's a guy that assesses what he has and then he plays to the strengths of his personnel and away from the weaknesses. You know, there are people, I heard it again the other day, there's a legitimate concern about Michael Penix's game, that he has a blind spot in his game where he's not very good between the hashes. He's not very good in the middle of the field, and he's just not really good in the short stuff at all, period.
Mm-hmm.
He's a deep thrower. That's his comfort zone. He's elite at it, but he has some weaknesses short. And we saw it in the Michigan game. This was Breer quoting some coaches, NFL coaches, who said, you know, you saw Michigan take that away and dare him to throw in the middle of the field, and he couldn't do it. And they took that thing away. And I think that just speaks to how impressive it is that Grubb got such prolific production out of those receivers, given the fact that, you know, they didn't use the whole field.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
They figured out a way to use those guys, and that excites me about JSN too. You know, figure out what he does well and get the most out of him.
Absolutely. You know, and that's what we liked about McDonald as well. Everything you heard out of the Baltimore players, why they thought he was the best guy for the, you know, to become the next head coach, you know, wherever he went, was, hey, he talked to us. He learned what we were great at and what we weren't. And then he made the scheme fit us, not us fit the scheme.
Yeah. That's what we want to see out of a coordinator, right? We kept waiting to see it out of Waldron, you know, setting other things up, you know, thinking 5-6 moves ahead and getting the most out of his personnel on a consistent basis. And what it felt like to me is sometimes it would be more like, you know, God, we haven't thrown it to DK in a while. Let's throw it to DK.
Yeah.
Instead of, you know, the flow of the game and, you know, picking on matchups. And when you get a mismatch, this is one thing that I do have to assume that part of this is Grubb, that, you know, you and I are both Cougs, and we saw it up close when they played us, especially the game in Pullman 2 years ago, where when Penix senses a mismatch, he'll just keep hammering away at it until you stop it. And then he's like the 3-point shooter that, you know, if he's cold, he shoots until he breaks out of his slump. And if he's hot, he just keeps shooting anyway.
Yeah.
And he'll just keep pounding away at that. We haven't seen that kind of mindset in a long time.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of like every time we brought up, you know, one of the things that we liked about, you know, kind of how the Patriots were there for a long time is it seemed like every week. It's why you hated picking any Patriot players in fantasy football, because one week they'd rush it 40 times, the next week they'd throw it 50. You know, but they were literally game planning week to week of what we can exploit on the other side of the ball. That's what they did, and that's why they were great.
Bryce over at the Hawk Zone podcast asks about Derek Hall, who I think is a really interesting. Did we see a second-year jump, kind of a Boye Mafe type jump? Could he be a better fit in McDonald's defense? Here's my question about Derek Hall. And there's some guys in this draft that I feel a similar way about. I feel like, you know, he's so athletic and he's so put together, and his frame and his physique is so impressive. I've stood next to him. I feel like he can add more weight. I wonder if some of these in-between guys like Hall and like a guy on my guys list that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, if you can put 15 pounds on him and have him be more of a defensive end, because they're going to play by all accounts what looks like a hybrid 4-3-3-4. So your defensive tackles and defensive ends are going to be kind of interchangeable, and some of those guys are going to be able to drop back into coverage, and some won't be asked to do that. I wonder, you know, because Hall's game isn't about explosion and twitch; it's power. It's that one arm bar and bull rushing. And if you maybe get him up to, I don't know if he can carry 275.
I mean, I think with both Hall and Morris that they're going to be given every opportunity to step up and have a year 2 jump like Mafe. My question is, are they the type of guys that they're going to put the work in and do what's necessary to make that jump? I think this coaching staff absolutely is going to give both of those guys the opportunity for that to happen. They're going to have to, as players, seize the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you saw one of the first things that we saw when Mike McDonald was introduced and he walked into VMAC that first time is he spotted Mike Morris right there, the guy who played for him for a year at Michigan, gave him a big old hug and said, hey, we're going to get after this, Excited to see what he can do with that dude after basically redshirting for a year, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Let's see here. Oh, God. This guy. This is the guy I was just looking at today, Miles Cole. I was looking at his stats. He's 6. Let me look this guy up. Just because he brought him up, and I think it's interesting enough. Texas Tech, same school as Tyree Wilson last year, who kind of fooled all of us there for a minute into thinking he might be a match just because he was so tall and so long. Right here he is, Miles Cole, 6'6", 278, 37-inch arms.
Yes.
But like zero production. Like just didn't.
But when we start getting into these types of players,
Tyree Wilson type production.
When we start to get into these types of players, I really can't give my honest opinion of where the Hawks would be on them, because these would be the ones where, hey, is that something they look for or don't, right?
Yeah.
Do they think they can, develop this guy into something that becomes a starter or at least a significant role player? I don't know how they look at that. And so, I mean, he's interesting at just strictly from athletic stats and measurements. He's intriguing, but you know what? If this coaching staff and this front office are like, yeah, that's not what we value anymore. We're looking at X, Y, and Z. So, yeah, I don't really have an opinion on Miles Cole. And quite frankly, none of the players I've looked at in the draft have these unique physical traits or athletic measurements, because, again, I have no idea where they stand on it. I mean,
that's why
all we saw from the linebackers was, they like really mobile, athletic linebackers. So we have more of opinion about that position group than any others, because those were the only real significant signings we had that were, we didn't, we know who Leonard Williams is. We know This is a brand new linebacker room, right? So that was revealing. But outside of that, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's kind of what we touched on earlier with why a guy like Darrell Taylor may have some appeal on day 3 as a trade candidate, because all the edges that are left at that point in this draft are guys like Miles Cole, who, they might be athletic, they might have an interesting physical trait, but they don't translate. They don't look like ass kickers on the field. I think the other kid that comes to mind is Austin Booker. I think it's Kansas or Kansas State. He looks like a basketball player. He's 6'6", 235 pounds, but he's coming off the edge as like a outside linebacker, defensive end type. You got to show some production, and I'll use this to check another name off my guys list, because I'd rather have a guy like this over a guy like Miles Cole all day long, and that's Brennan Jackson from Washington State. And it's not just because he's a Coug.
Yeah.
It's, at the beginning of the process, a couple weeks ago, I would have given you Braden McGregor from in over this guy. But the more I watch him, he's not as big, he's not as long. He's 6'4", 264. His arms are, 4 inches shorter. He's got 33-inch arms. But he's incredibly fast, and he has a nonstop motor. He goes from whistle to whistle, from snap to whistle on every single play. High character guy. He's a leader in the locker room, and he's going to give you everything he has on every snap. And I think there's more upside to be had there too. So Jackson's a guy. If he's there in the 4th rounds, I'm taking him all day.
Possibly 5th. Possibly might fall to the 5th.
Yeah.
The Coug that I have that I was going to bring up is obviously Jaden Hicks, the safety.
Yeah.
I don't know if he gets out of the 2nd, but if we do get a second, if we get a second back, or if we can be, higher up in the 3rd, I think that would be a great pick.
They're going to take a safety at some point in this draft, right? Rayshon Jenkins is the only guy signed beyond this year, and he'll be, I think he's 30 now, right?
Yeah.
There's potential they could extend Julian Love if he's a real fit and he plays well this year. But it's a good enough safety class, and there are guys in this class that have that kind of versatility that Mike McDonald wants, where he can play too high, and a guy can play some free responsibilities and some strong responsibilities, maybe come down the slot and cover tight ends. That's why I talked a lot about him on earlier shows today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But Cole Bishop's another guy on my guys list too.
Me too.
Yeah. They got it. There's a couple of priorities for me in this draft. One is you got to get a long-term day one starter at left guard.
Okay.
And then you got to get at least one guy in that linebacker room and in the safety room on a 4-year rookie deal. Like, I like the guys they signed. I like Baker and Dodson. I think there's a good chance they eye Dodson and view him as a guy that they might want to extend longer term at the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
But again, get a guy in a rookie deal. They've got to have some future to look forward to.
Yeah, if we miss out on the two guys we've already talked about, the UW and Duke guys, second round, Cooper Beebe, Kansas State. That'd be one that I feel would be plug and play. Also offers a little positional versatility. And then for the third round, I would probably go with I sent it to you earlier. Now I'm blanking. What was his name? He's a kid out of, I think, Texas A&M. No.
Hold on.
Can't be him.
Let me check our text. Oh, yeah. Christian Haynes.
Yeah. Christian Haynes.
Yeah.
Out of UConn. Linebackers. I actually have 3 linebackers that I'm interested in. If Edgerrin Cooper lasted to the second round and we had a second round pick, I think that would be a good, and he's very athletic. So I think he kind of fits what they're doing based off, what we know so far. I would say in the 4th round, the Missouri kid, Tyron Hopper.
Okay.
I think that would be another guy that you could maybe get in the 4th, possibly 5th. And then again, we talked about Jackson out of Washington State as possibly that hybrid, depending on what it looks like for them, even though he's listed as a linebacker, would he be more of a hybrid edge guy? I don't know.
Well, he's another guy that can he carry 280 pounds?
Yeah, because he's already close to 250, so it's not a huge jump. And he's tall. Isn't he 6'4"? So it's not like you're trying to pack it on a 6 foot tall or 6'1" guy. No,
and at the combine he weighed in at 264. So maybe teams have already asked him to add some weight. Maybe he is a guy that they would see, playing standing up a little bit more up on the line.
Yeah, again, all of this is going to be, a much different conversation when the day after the draft wraps up, and we've not only drafted, but we've done them, the undrafted free agent signings, or at least we have a good idea who they're going to sign. A lot of this type of player talk will become much more informed and substantive.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons that I'm glad that it appears that they're finally prioritizing comp picks. I think I mentioned it earlier. As we sit right now, we would get a 4th and a 5th next year. We lose a 5th next year in the Leonard Williams deal. And so we'd have we'd have all our picks, 2 4ths, and we'd have a 5th at the end of the round. And it looks like, based on these reports about the guards that they're talking to, that I don't think they're going to sign anyone else this offseason that would jeopardize losing one of those comp picks. And so I like that idea, because you are going to know more. You're just going to have more of a sample size. This draft is an experiment for them too, and getting to know each other and going through a draft together. And then, when we're sitting here a year from now, A, we may have clarity on the quarterback situation.
Yes.
And B, a full assortment of draft picks with some extra maneuverability and to where you can really be more specific about what you target to get Mike Macdonald.
Oh, absolutely. And Grubb, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Because, I think one of the things that McVay did that was brilliant is he went from the wide zone blocking scheme for their rushing to the heavy scheme, right? The heavy zone.
Yeah.
So maybe Grubb, valued what he had at UW, and therefore he played to that, skill set for that set of players.
Dylan Johnson.
But now coming in and evaluating who we have, who we draft, who we sign, that he then now adjusts the scheme to fit what would get the best out of the group. So I think it's not just on the defensive side of the ball. It's also going to be on the offensive side. And, again, we might a year from now be going like, holy cow, like these guys that the old regime didn't, give a lot of playing time or, didn't develop as well as, they should have. They might be some very important positional, rotation players or starters at the end of this. I mean, I stayed up on the screen right now about Kobe Bryant, and I agree. I think they're going to give him every opportunity, whether it's at the slot or the corner or the safety positions, to show them what he has and what he's good at and how they can best utilize him. I think he would be a great safety.
He showed some cool flashes in the preseason last year when they made that move. What surprised me the most is that, I guess just preconceived notions, right? I thought, well, he'll play free because he's been a corner, right? That's usually the transition.
Mm-hmm.
But they had him playing strong safety. I thought, okay. And then he came up and he laid some guys out.
Yeah.
In preseason, really showed a willingness and even a thirst for coming up and hitting guys. I haven't given up on him at all. And I think it'll be really interesting to see how they take those snaps in the preseason.
And that's why I've almost looked at this draft as not just who we're grabbing right now, but the guys we grabbed 2 years ago and last year, because now we get to see, with different coaches and different, schemes and different styles, hey, who steps up, who doesn't? Like, we might be surprised, by the Bryants, the Morrises, the Halls, the Youngs. Like, this is very exciting to me because it's kind of a fresh start for all the young guys, right? Fresh start.
And it's exciting. Your boys are excited about it too. I can tell.
Very excited.
They're back there partying.
Yes. They have a very intense Uno game going on with my girlfriend, Christina. So
once the pizza and the lasagna kicks in, it'll,
Oh, God, I hope.
Here's some sleepers. These are two guys that I haven't studied. And so I love this time of year when you start to hear about some of these guys. I had Emery Hunt on the show today, and his draft guide, I think he goes deeper on smaller school guys than anyone out there that does a draft guide. And so now it's like, names I've never heard, and I get to go try to watch them or try to watch film of them. So Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and then Hunter Norzad's the guy that came up today in conversation too. There's some center guard types that I want to take a closer look at because of their athleticism. Tanner Bartolini is another guy that really, really flashed in the combine. And I kind of dismissed him at the time because I think we're set at center. You brought him up earlier. I'm a big believer in Olu Oluwatimi. I think he's going to be a very, very solid, dependable player. But a guy like Bartolini did play some significant snaps at guard at Wisconsin too. So it'd be cool to get someone like that in there as well.
So I'm not as high as on Baptiste, but I do like Dorzad. Yes, I think they would be great day 3 sleeper picks if they're there and we can pick them up. Absolutely, Norzad. This
is a question I've gotten a few times, and this is kind of the way I'd answer it too. What does success look like? For me, it's not about playoffs. It's that I don't want to finish the year feeling like we could have been better but underperformed. This is the way I've answered this question for 2 months now, probably. To me, my expectations this year and the way I'm going to measure success has zero to do with win-loss record. Absolutely zero. I want it to feel like 2012. I was reading a piece today that I think it was Michael Schonduger, the Athletic, who said that you can tell by the way that Schneider's going about filling holes on this roster that Mike Macdonald was brought in to win now, and he's expected to win now. They're not going to tolerate a rebuild. They're not even going to consider that option. And so, I hope people don't read that to think, well, if they only win 6 games, oof, that might not work.
Mhm.
If at the end of the season, like we did in 2012, you could start to see the pieces coming together.
Mhm.
Like, oh man, teams are not going to want to play us this, December, even though we're not going to make the playoffs. If that's what ends up happening, like we're a tough team to play, and you can start to see the identity on both sides of the ball heading into the offseason. Like, okay, now we just need to go get a few more dudes and another year of the offseason program, and let's go.
Yeah, for me, the success would be that we are competitive, and as the season goes, we're more and more competitive. And like you said, the identities start to become, more clear, and they start to execute them at a higher level because they're getting more reps at it, and they're getting, experience in the new schemes and systems. That to me is the success I'm looking for. I want next offseason, like you said, to get the 2012 feel of, hey, this is a young, hungry team. They got some players, and guess what? Every year that this group, and this coaching staff is together, it's just going to get tougher and tougher, and it's going to be a dogfight. That's the type of end of the year feeling I want. Which is how I felt at the end of 2012. It was like, wow, like,
we're building
these young guys made young mistakes, but as the year went on, they made less and less young mistakes. Hey, this system is really, starting to click, and they're really starting to believe in it, and they're starting to execute it at a higher and higher level as time goes on. That to me is the success. And then I understand why Schneider says what he says. Obviously, they have to, have that mentality that we are built to win, and that's what we're aiming to do every week, is go out and win that game. But I would almost guarantee you, in Schneider's head, though, he would feel the same way. But as long as the development and the progress and the growth is there, that this is going to be, then brought into the offseason, like you said, and built on, and more players brought in, and, boom, 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 then he's not going to be upset with McDonald if we're 6-10 or 6-11 now.
No,
or whatever.
And I think how we stack up against the division is going to go a long way towards, giving us a feel for where this thing's headed to. Like, you got it. It's almost felt hopeless against the 49ers the last couple of years. And like they would have to have a terrible game. We'd have to play, out of our ass.
Mm-hmm. And it would still be close.
I'm not even, to use my same example, even if you go 0-2 against them again this year, but they're dogfights.
Yeah.
And you're going toe to toe with them physically.
Yes.
And it's just a player here or there or whatever. And you can feel the gap closing with them. And that our defensive scheme is going to be able to impact that offense. And when we play the Rams too, because that offense is going to be so good.
Yeah.
That, we need to see that too. We've got to make up some of that ground.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Let's see. There was one here. Hold on. Oh, this one I think is interesting because I keep hearing about the offensive line. And unless we obviously draft a guy to play left guard, which Barton or Fautanu would from day one, I saw it again today in the piece in The Athletic. Like, they may be set at center with Oluwatimi and Bradford at right guard, but what are they going to do about left guard? Anthony Bradford played left tackle a bit at LSU.
Yep.
And so to me, I think it's very possible, depending on who they draft, that he could end up at left guard because he's used to playing on the left side. Some guys can play one side only.
Yeah.
And I heard Taylor Lewan talking about this, or Sean Matthews, I think, talking about this at the combine. He was like, I could only play one side.
Yeah.
I told him I could play both sides.
Walter Jones said the same thing.
But I lied.
Walter Jones said the same thing. I mean, it's years ago. It wasn't recent. I think this was about 5-6 years ago. But he said the same thing. He's like, hey, I was a left tackle. If they would have said, hey, by the way, we're set at left tackle, and, a couple years you'll get there, but, bring a slide you to the right. He goes, I probably would not have ever been the player I was.
It shows you the value that, bringing George Fant in, because he can play. He's shown he can play both sides.
Yeah.
And I think what's important about this concept, again, it's a moot point if they draft Fautanu or Barton, in my opinion. But
I'd throw Beatty in there too. I'd throw Connor Beatty in there.
He played left side. Left tackle even for the last 2 years with those arms. If you don't take one of those guys early, and you wait on guard or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is an important distinction because I like what I see on tape from Tremaine Antrim, the kid they signed from the Rams, who got an opportunity to be a starter 2 years ago and then got hurt and missed the rest of the year. He's a right guard.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about how much they like him, but if they do, and if he challenges for a guard spot, he may be more comfortable at right guard. And I wonder if it does make sense to move Bradford over. There's some precedence there because they did that with Damian Lewis after his rookie.
And again, a year from now, I'd be more confident saying yes or no. My answer right now is, again, Grubb and the O-line coach and all that, it's going to be up to them. Like, do they think he can do it? Do they think that that's his strength and the best position for us to get the most out of him? So I definitely think it's a strong possibility. But again, what do they think?
Yeah. What do you know about Miami's James Williams as a star position prospect in the draft to compete with Rayshon Jenkins? James Williams was a guy I was really intrigued with at the beginning of the draft process because of his height and his length.
Yeah.
And then I kind of stopped studying him and stopped watching him and stopped mocking him just because he had such a poor combine. And now he's being projected more as an outside linebacker type, which I think he would have a really awkward body type for that.
Yeah.
But he's also going in the 6th and 7th round these days in just about every mock that I see. So
yeah,
maybe he's a guy. To me, a guy like that would all come down to, can he be a killer on special teams? Because that's something they're going to prioritize in the 6th and 7th round. If they think you have upside as a player, Jarek Reed's a great example last year.
Yeah.
They think he has upside as a safety, but also he's a badass special teams player, and that's why they spent a draft pick on him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know enough about Williams because I kind of stopped paying attention to him, to be honest.
I have really looked into him. I didn't like what I saw on tape. I don't.
There you go. Blue Green Zone. You teach me football. Hey, I appreciate that. And I do, whenever we're having conversations like this, I do like to add the disclaimer that I'm not a scout. I've never coached the game. I just have been watching it for 40 years and have been around football players, and I know you have too. I think I know a thing or two about the game, but it's why I like to have guests on that know a lot more than me.
Yeah.
Because then we get to pick their brain a little bit. Love moving Anthony Bradford to his natural left guard, then Antrim can compete at his natural right guard. Don't forget about McClendon Curtis too.
Yep.
I mean, he's a guy that I can't find any tape on him, because he just might have to go back and try and find some college tape. But we poached him off the Raiders practice squad at the very beginning of the season last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they carried him on the 53 all season long, even though they never activated him for a game.
Yeah.
Along with Raekwon O'Neal,
Yep.
who's a tackle, and we did the same thing, poached him from the Bucks. Both those guys, the teams liked him. We're hoping to pass him through waivers, get him on the practice squad, to keep him on the roster all year, even though they had no hope of playing really, says a lot about him. And Schneider name dropped both those guys the other day, especially Curtis when it comes to guards. So I think those guys are going to be in the mix too, man. They're all going to get a shot.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one more. I actually have two more guys on my list. You talked about some linebackers. One linebacker, and this goes along with my whole I'm not a scout thing. Maybe that explains it. But I feel like I'm way higher on this guy than anybody else. And it's Maris Liufau from Notre Dame. 6'2", 234, 34 and a quarter inch arms. He's really young. I think he's only 21, 22 years old. Really athletic, 4'6", 440. When I watch these linebackers, and I have a database I subscribe to, I can watch some all 22 stuff, and I'll get all excited about watching guys that have big names, and I just don't see them kicking ass. Like I want my linebackers to be ass kickers. I want them to go hunting for contact and taking on blockers. I was going to say something inappropriate. Like it gets them really excited. Like that they love it. They thrive on it, and they don't shy away from it. And they take guys on, they take half guys on, and they can go sideline to sideline. And this guy, and maybe it's the kind of the Palomalu fro that he has that just makes him look more badass. But but I see him flying around the field with his hair on fire, high motor, taking on blockers, hitting guys, running and covering. I'm not sure why he's not ranked higher.
Yeah, I mean, I do like him for all the reasons you just brought up. I believe that, again, I think that some of these, whether they're, the bloggers or podcasters, they have their biases of what they think a position and the player and what that should look like. I would guess with him specifically is that he does a lot of the dirty work that allows the play to be made by someone else, because he did, hold up against the block, or he did shed the block and make the, running back turn back inside, or, whatever the situation is. And so that's just not as sexy to them, that the dirty work got done so someone else could get the stat.
Yeah.
And so I think that's maybe why you see him not rated as highly.
I just keep waiting to see that they're having a meeting with him or something, because he just seems like a guy that McDonald would love. He rushes the passer, he comes off the edge, he lines up all over the place. Like,
yeah, but again, new regime, new era. Are they maybe smokescreening people like that, where they already feel like they know them and they don't? It's not necessary to have a visit. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
We'll know after the draft.
Really like Tyke Smith and Mustafa. What's your thoughts on these two? Tyke Smith I like, but I think we've talked about some other safety guys. I don't like him more than Kobe Bryant. Like, I don't think he's better than Jarek Reed or Kobe Bryant, who are already on the roster, and I know Reed's coming back from a knee injury. Mustafa, I just haven't been able to get my hands on any all 22 tape for him yet. I know he's a guy that Rob Staten loves, and so I keep wanting to study him, and I just haven't had a chance to yet.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the Smith. Mustafa, I have, watched some film, not a lot, and I like him. I do. I
know he likes to hit. That's the one thing I keep hearing about him.
Yeah, but again, it's like, I like him, and if that's what they're looking for, and that's a person they think they can work with and really bring the best out of, I could see Mustafa much more than Smith at this point.
I'll tell you another safety that I like, and I was really surprised. I think now he's starting to move up draft boards a little bit, because I have a harder time getting him in the 5th or 6th round. Is Dominic Hampton, the UW Huskies, 6'2", 230. Like, he's a big, long, rangy guy that can play in the box and can cover a little bit too. He's interesting too. I do have a receiver, because I think this is, we can talk about receivers a little bit. I think it's a position that most fans think we're set. Like, we're fine. I've had people come at me for like, what are you taking a receiver in the 3rd round for? Because I'll take Brendan Rice sometimes, or when I'll take Malachi Corley sometimes, because I know the Seahawks met with him, and he's an interesting dude. I think the Debo Samuel comps are kind of ballparkish. And people will be like, what are you talking about? We don't need a receiver. Well, you always do, first of all. And second of all, when, 2 of your receivers have the biggest cap hits outside of your quarterback on the roster, one of them is on the way wrong side of 30, right? You can never have too many of these guys. And so I've been saying for weeks that they're going to take a receiver in this draft, probably higher than you think they will, or that you want them to. And one guy that I'm absolutely in love with is Luke McCaffrey. Like, I
do. I like him.
Bigger than I thought he was going to be. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. His relative athletic score is like top 10 at the position. It's a 9.43. He ran a 4.46, which is faster than his brother ran at the combine.
Yep.
They did the simulcam thing just to show it. 36-inch vertical, really explosive athlete. And the thing I like about him is he's only been playing receiver for 2 years, and he looks like a natural. Like, the reports say he can run routes better, but he looked really good at the combine. Great body control, really soft hands. And I love the fact that up until he played wide receiver, he was a quarterback, because I just think that they see the field differently. They understand the game differently. And I think he's a really, really interesting guy.
Yeah, I do like McCaffrey, and if he's there in the third, I would not be surprised if they picked him.
Like all the love for Ladd McConkey, and I'm not so sure McCaffrey is that different than McConkey, other than McConkey's just a more accomplished receiver. Like his routes are tighter, like he's done it longer.
Yeah.
But I think physically they're very similar.
Yeah.
And they're going to take a receiver, so get used to it. they're gonna.
And maybe that's why Schneider wants Metcalf to throw up big numbers this year so we can trade him next.
Yeah, right. Because look, they could be in a dilemma next year because I think it's real possible, like we've said, that Ryan Grubb unlocks DK Metcalf and gets a 1,500-yard season with 10 TDs out of him.
Yeah. And
then he goes into the last year of his deal, and now he's more valuable to us than he's ever been before. He's in the prime of his career. He's still young, but yet now he's on an expiring contract in a wide receiver market that's just absolutely stupid. Yeah. And he's gonna command $30 million plus.
Yeah.
And so just another reason. And I don't know, everyone will just say, well, you just trade him. Well, are you going to be able to trade a guy on an expiring deal that's already a big cap hit, that you're going to have to sign to a $200 million contract after that, when every single year now in this draft, 10 wide receiver ones come out every year in the draft because of how they're producing these guys in college now, and you can get those guys on rookie deals.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think there's going to be a trade market for a guy like that.
I think the trade market would be very limited to a team that really truly believes we are one player away, and the player is a big time wide receiver.
That could be.
That's very few teams.
Yeah.
That is very few teams.
I think I don't know if you're going to see a Tyreek Smith trade ever again, like that kind of return, or a Devontae Adams trade again. I just think teams are going to value, they can get a younger guy. And it used to be, Schneider even said this 4 or 5 years ago. He would always say that it takes receivers more than some other position groups. It takes them like 2 to 3 years sometimes to acclimate to the pros because it's so different. Well, it's not now. The NFL's been borrowing and stealing, scheme concepts from the college game now.
Yeah.
Years. And now we have an offensive coordinator who came from the college game. So I don't know that that's the case anymore. These guys seem to be contributing more as rookies, right off the bat. Ricky Pearsall is another one. Here's the thing about some of these guys, Misfit 74. I love Ricky Pearsall, but he's another guy that he's smack dab in the second round. And unless they trade down and recoup second round picks, even if they do, they're probably going to be later second round picks. When you look at most of these trade charts, depending on how far down we move, obviously you might only be bringing back another third or two if you move down a couple of times. I just don't think they're going to land in the range to get Pearsall. And if you are in that range, you're probably looking at other position groups, right?
Yeah.
Like that might be where you get an Edgerrin Cooper or a Junior Colson. If you want like a higher end inside linebacker.
Yeah.
It's tough. We got spoiled the last couple of years with all those Russell Wilson picks.
Yeah.
It was a lot easier to do mock drafts the last couple of years.
Oh God, it was a dream.
You know?
2-2s.
Especially when you move back a couple of times and you end up with like 14 picks. You're like, yes, I'm feasting at the buffet.
We are draft capital rich.
Wait. Do we have breaking news? Oh, wait. Here, first of all, let's do this. Setting the edge. Love this guy. He's got some, he studies the draft. He's got some really good opinions. McCaffrey may be the best possession wide receiver in the draft. But check this out, too. Is this true? It is still April Fool's Day. So I'm going to take this. And the 49ers just traded Brandon Ayuk to Pittsburgh for picks 20 and a second round 2025 pick. Is that true? Going to confirm. Let's confirm on the Twitter. I need to see it from Schefter. Let's see. Okay. A lot of Mariners, a lot of Caitlin Clark. Patriots signed Carson Wentz. Ooh, that's earth-shattering. Okay, I don't see it. Hold on. Let me do a search for it. Oh, Ayuk traded. Let me see. No. Breaking 9 hours ago? No. Okay, I don't see anything confirmed. So either Setting the Edge may have fallen for an April Fool's joke, because I don't see it from any verified accounts. So, but it sure sounds like Ayuk might get traded. That he's asking for north of $30 million and wants to make more than Deebo Samuel, and that might be tough for them to pay both those guys. Which, again, all the more reason why I think their approach to this roster is, look, we want to reshape things. This needs to go in a different direction because we weren't seeing growth. We weren't seeing improvement, especially on the defensive side of the ball under Carroll anymore. Yeah. But also, we got to take advantage of these windows because the cap implications are starting to hit the 49ers now. Mm-hmm. They had to let go of some guys that they didn't want to let go of. They didn't want to move on from Eric Armstead. No. They've got some injury issues. Like Hufanga's not going to be ready to start the season. Now they might have to move on from Ayuk. They're going to have to.
Give me 2 seconds. I got a kid emergency. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
All right.
Just to finish that thought, you got to go. You got to pay Ayuk or move on from him. You got to pay Brock Purdy next year, and then Rams wise, you've got maybe 1 or 2 more shots with Matthew Stafford. He's contractually, you can't really move on from him for the next 2 years, so you're kind of stuck with him. What do you guys think about? Let's do this, because you guys know that I like to be open-minded, right, and consider all possibilities. What are some curveballs that you guys think you could see the Seahawks do in the first round? Everything okay?
Yeah, crisis averted.
You are quite the multitasker.
Yes, my apologies to all the live streaming fans right now.
I think we just came up with a new sitcom. He's a podcaster. He's a father. He's a business owner. How does he juggle them all at the same time? I was just kind of posing the question of, like, what are some curveballs maybe? I mean, we already talked about cornerback. Running back's not realistic, but what are some curveballs people might think that we might see? And maybe the flip side of that question is, what are some picks that some of the viewers might see the Seahawks make that would piss them off? And
wide receiver. Wide receiver.
I think absolutely. It would. Yeah. Oh, in the first?
Yeah, if you went at 16, or even if you traded back in the first, but it's still your first pick, and it was wide receiver, I think that would be a massive curveball that would really upset most Seahawks fans.
Yeah.
And then I do think, if they went with another, more of a block-eating, run-stopping D tackle, nose tackle, I think that would not go over well with most of the fan base, right?
Oh, perfect timing, because I just put this comment in the room. I was thinking I keep thinking back to the year they took Rashad Penny in the first round. And what I think people didn't understand at the time, and Schneider and Carroll tried to explain afterwards, is Chris Carson, they had Chris Carson, but he was injury prone, and they needed reliability.
Yeah.
Ironically, because what people forget, because he was banged up, his entire time as a pro.
Not in college.
He was one of the most durable players in college, and in fact, scored really, really high on the Seahawks reliability scale of they measure these things.
Yeah.
And also they didn't have a second round pick that year. And so they knew they really liked this player, and they weren't going to get him or anyone like him after the gap.
Yeah.
So they knew that they might be reaching for him a little bit based on other people's boards, but they wanted the player. And I could see they don't have a second round pick this year. And so that's where, even if they trade down a little bit and don't get a second back, that if there's a guy that they have 40th, right? Just, or by the consensus, maybe he's the 40th best player, but he's at the top of their board because of that positional need grade. Maybe it is a guy like Junior Colson that they feel like can be program setting guy to come in and help incorporate the scheme and be a long-term answer at linebacker. Or maybe it's this guy right here that Misfit's talking about. Maybe it's Tavondre Sweat, because even though everyone has him going top of the second, maybe middle of the second, he's the one player in this draft. He's a one of one. He's a unicorn in this draft. There aren't any other legit nose tackles. McKinley Jackson's the next one, and he's 320.
Yeah.
So this is a dude that could be a game-changing, gap-stuffing, Mike McDonald talks about that run wall, that maybe you reach for this guy, and a bunch of people will say we took him too early, but they weren't going to get a chance later on, and they just valued what he could bring.
Yeah. Yep. No,
I wouldn't be mad about that, though. I really, if they trade down, I wouldn't. If they take him at 16, I'd be pissed.
Yeah. Now you say 25 to 30, I'm not pissed.
Right.
Yeah. And you got back, a third rounder in that trade down. Yeah.
I could kind of see that happening,
I can. Exactly. I mean, and again, this is going to be why this draft is so exciting, is we're going to get a whole lot more information about what the new direction is and what type of players they're looking for and what they value. Whether it's big time college guys that have, 40 plus starts, or, hey, it's the guys that have this certain athletic trait or ability, these are questions that are going to be answered, or at least given more information after the draft, for sure. I would not be mad at the Sweat idea. Again, mid-20s, and we got a third rounder back, and we picked him up because we knew he wasn't going to get past 45.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Here's some love for Braden Fisk. Here's some more love for Braden Fisk. And here's what's interesting about this, and I think it's fascinating. This is a guy that I almost put on my list. He's not on the list that I brought to the show tonight, but he's on the list. You know what I mean? Yeah. I absolutely love this dude. Loved what I saw at the Senior Bowl and the Combine. It's, the short arms, obviously aren't a concern because the Seahawks met with them formally at the Combine.
Yeah.
And so the sub 34-inch arms or whatever might not be as stringent of a metric as it was under Carroll. The dude just plays so hard. And I think the way that I heard DJ and Bucky Brooks talking about it at the Combine is he's so explosive and quick off the snap, and he gets up into the lineman so quickly that it negates.
Yeah.
It mitigates the shorter arms because he gets in on you, and you can't lock him out. He's versatile. He can play down on all fours. He can play the edge. Yeah. He's an interesting dude that, he's another guy that, because he's so unique, and because when they pick again in the third round, there aren't going to be any of these legit defensive end types that can move up and down the line. If they trade back into the mid to late 20s, people might view it as a reach, but I could see Fisk maybe fitting that category too, of like, oh, that might be early for him, but people are just going to love him as a player.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it also always will play out. Did the guy put in the work to reach his full potential, and did the staff put him in the best position to succeed and reach his full potential and utilize him, right?
Yeah.
And under Carroll, especially the last 3 or 4 years, I was not as confident in the second part of that equation.
Right. Yeah. It's almost, they did such a great job the first 10 years of his tenure in developing young players. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't really see that the last couple of years in some respects. Rockman Drum says, a receiver at 16 would have him scratching his head. I'll tell you what, I'll probably get some blowback for this. I'd be pretty pissed if we're sitting at 16 and we take Brock Bowers. And the reason is, I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's a dynamic player, but he's not an all-around tight end. He's not a guy that's going to kick ass in the run game. He's basically, an extra wide receiver. He's a really, really dynamic move type tight end, really dynamic, maybe a Hall of Fame type in the right system. But with committing the kind of money they did to Noah Fant, presumably to unlock, finally tap into his full skill set and take, make the most of that, kind of feature him. And then they spend the money to bring Farrell Brown in as a blocking guy. Like, I just feel like that would be a luxury pick. that even though you could explain it all day long by best player available, no matter what, I would feel like, the impact of that pick just isn't going to be as significant as one of these other position groups. I wouldn't be that happy. I wouldn't mind seeing him on the board at 16, because then I think we would have a lot of leverage, and that might actually, if all the quarterbacks are gone, that might give us our best chance to get some phone calls. And teams really wanting to, a team like Cincinnati wanting to come up and get another big time weapon for Joe Burrow. And I think they're in the mid 20s, and maybe they'd want to move up for a guy like that.
Yeah, I agree. I would, if he's there at 16 and they actually picked him at 16, it would just bring back all the memories I have of the failed, wide receiver experiment, when we had a Creed Humphreys day one starter at center. It just bring back all my D. Eskridge feelings and how dumb I just felt that pick was. And that was before we knew he was injury prone.
Yeah.
That was just based off of what our team needed and what was available.
Yeah.
And it just,
I just feel it would kind of be like, the opportunity cost of what could have been, like,
exactly. Yeah.
Because, Brock Bowers is great.
Yep.
And he's a guy that as a rookie with the right team could catch 70 balls for 1,000 yards. But then if he does that, well, then Noah Fant's not giving you your return on his investment, and you've doubled down at a position that I don't think you need to double down on. So
and to answer the directly, a head scratcher for wide receiver at 16. Again, to me, yes, that would be a head scratcher. However, based on how the draft's falling, if all of a sudden they had one of these guys as a top 10 player overall, and he's at 16, he's a wide receiver, I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled the trigger. I wouldn't be.
No, I think wide receiver might be the wide receiver and corner, which we talked about earlier, would be the two best examples of
you can never have enough.
Fans wouldn't understand it, but you can absolutely make the case that when they look up at their board, that's the guy at the top of their board, because they're both such good classes. Yeah. And the run on offensive tackles, like if we're at 16 and 5 of the 6 quarterbacks go before us, and some people think all 6 will, but let's just say 5, because someone always falls, right? Yeah. Maybe it's Bo Nix this year. Maybe Penix. Maybe the buzz isn't accurate and he does end up going later. So let's say 5 of the 6. So that leaves 10 more players. Then the offensive tackles are going to go.
Yeah.
And there's probably going to be 5 of them taken before our pick.
I agree.
So now you're looking at the entire draft class minus 5 quarterbacks, which you weren't going to take anyway, 5 offensive tackles, which you probably weren't going to take. All your top guys are still on the board with 4 picks to go. And so all of a sudden, if a receiver, if you've got, and those guys are going to go, that's the thing, Neighbors and Dunze and Harrison, they're going to go too. So there's 3 more. Now you're down to 13, 14, 15, 16, 2
more before you're picking.
I like Brock Bowers is going to be there, and hopefully we won't take him. But you can see what I'm saying. Like there's a world where cornerback 1 might still be on the board at 16.
Yeah.
And if they like that, Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo and all his skills and everything, or if Terrion Arnold's up, and they look up and they go, holy shit, our number 1 corner in the draft is sitting there at 16 because they're
taking him.
Yeah.
They are going to take him.
And they're not going to worry about having to explain it to the fans that they already have Reek and they already have to. No, they're just going to make the best of it,
Yeah.
Plus, we don't know how they feel about Reek because they
no idea.
McDonald hasn't talked about him.
Yeah.
He really hasn't.
No information.
No. Yeah. So there's a lot to look forward to. This is going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun. I really, at the end of the day, don't you want him to trade back though?
That's my ideal. I'd like at least close to the top of the 3rd, ideally get into the 2nd. But again, there's plenty of draft charts that say that that's fair and equitable, but the reality is, until they actually make the trade, it depends on who's there and what they're willing to give up, right? But my preference is trade back.
Like, I guess I'd put it this way. I would rather, as much as I love Fautanu, if he's there at 16, given the choice, I would rather have the combination of Barton in the mid-20s and another second or third round pick or more than Fautanu at 16 and then not drafting again until the 17th pick of the third round. Like, I think Barton and Fautanu are maybe that close, in my opinion, that at least as far as addressing our need, that I'd rather have another pick on day 2, if not 2.
The only reason I would agree with you right there is because maybe Fautanu is, one of those players that's like, hey, I'm a left tackle. So if you're drafting me via guard, I don't want to be there. I don't know. I don't know if that's him.
Guards are almost paid as much as left tackles.
Well, no, but I'm just saying that I don't know if that's, even in his personality or thought process, but
I don't think he's going to be there, honestly. And so I think it's going to make that decision a little bit easier. I think Bowers is the one. Excuse me. It's making me choke. I'm so intensely upset about it. I think Bowers is the one kink, fly in the ointment, maybe, where they might get to him and just be like, God, our grade on him is so high that we have
to. I disagree. I think that, again, we just got ourselves out of the safety jam and how much we had invested financially in Adams and with Diggs.
Yeah.
That for a position that's even less important than safety, that Schneider would put himself back in that spot of, wow, we have a very expensive tight end room, not only financially, but now with draft pick capital. Yeah. I just don't see it happening.
He just saw, even, finances aside, he just saw a 2 or 3 year run where we had, a really strong 3 deep tight end room, and we didn't ever get the most out of any of the 3.
Even close.
Yeah. And so I think when he talks about, if I'm going to latch on to any optimism here, it's when he emphasized, when he was talking on his show last week, about how they do work positional need into their overall grade. And so maybe that knocks Bowers down because they're like, God, it's just we are going to consider need here in this case. Yeah. He would just be a luxury that just doesn't make sense. Because, man, people, if they take Brock Bowers at 16, just not to belabor this point, and they pass on Fautanu especially, but that's unlikely. But they pass on Graham Barton, Jackson Powers Johnson, which I don't think is a scheme fit. But fans are really, kind of keyed on him, or pick your pick, whoever else you like, or one of the tackles maybe. Mm-hmm. And oh man, that'd be a hard pill for me to swallow.
Yeah, agreed.
That'd be a tough one for them to explain, I think. Do you see an easy way to clear some cap space without hurting the future? Well, there has to be. Without hurting the future, any of the cap space moves they were to make right now with existing players and core players would kick dead money down the road a little bit. And so I guess the short answer is no, but I just tweeted this yesterday. There's 3 guys that they signed to pretty substantial kind of middle class veteran contracts this offseason. John Radigan, Mike Jackson, and Darrell Taylor. And they're each roughly, give or take a couple $100,000, around $3 million a piece, with very, very little guaranteed money. And so you could theoretically cut all 3 of those guys tomorrow. And I thought it would clear, based on over the cap, I thought it would clear about almost $9 million. Curtis Allen got back to me online and said it'd be a little over 6. But still, the point remains that those are 3 guys that they need to make the team. And so those are levers you can pull right now. If you trade Darrell Taylor during the draft, that clears you $3 million. And they have to, because right now they don't have enough cap space to sign a guard and sign their draft picks and set some aside for contingencies and injured reserve and practice squad and all of that. But I keep reminding people that last year they had to keep adjusting players' contracts all the way up until into the first week of training camp, if you recall, just to sign Devin Witherspoon. Like, they had to wait to sign some of their draft picks till the last second and beyond because they had to move some other stuff around. So they probably have those things already in mind. But yeah, there's things they could do. They could extend DK. They could extend Julian Love. He's in the last year of his deal. They could do some bonus conversions with Draymond Jones or DK. I think I was looking for specifics before we started tonight, and I couldn't find them, but I've been told that there's a little bit more they could get out of Geno, too. I think there's another $5 or $6 million they could get out of converting some of his base salary to a bonus. So, yeah, there's things they could do, but it's going to hurt the future. If you look at 2025 cap space right now, don't. Just look away because it's not as scary as it seems, but, there's nothing. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
But, that's just part of the plan, right? 2026, there's like 200,000 available. So,
yeah, I mean, that's why all these, NFL teams, they have these cap gurus. I think that they know exactly what levers they can and can't pull and at what, cost benefit analysis it is for them in the moment and in the future. So I think anything you see from this point forward, again, will be a lot like what we saw last year. It's just about squeezing in, the players, the draft picks, and potentially a veteran guard. Potentially.
And the Seahawks do things differently. They don't do void years because they don't want to play that game. They do shorter term contracts where the player gets more hard cash in the first 2 years of the deal, and so it's attractive to the player, but it prevents them from getting into these New Orleans Saints types of dilemmas, or the Rams or the Cowboys have done it for years, or the Dolphins, where they went into the offseason $80 million over the cap and couldn't bring Wilkins back and had to let all these guys go. And that's just not a smart way of doing business. It may be more fun for the fans because it's more like fantasy football every offseason.
Yeah.
But it's not.
But it doesn't lead to long-term franchise success.
No. And they're just not going to do that. The only time they've ever done void years was in 2020, and that was just a weird. Yeah. It kind of had to. You know, just to sign guys. Here's an interesting one. Brian Thomas is a freak, and he's a guy that I keep kind of forgetting about when it comes to the receivers. But there's some scouts out there who actually like his upside better than Malik Neighbors. Like, he's bigger. He's 6'2", 6'3". He's a sub 4.4 guy. He's an athletic freak that if Neighbors hadn't played on the same team as him, who knows what he would have done. Can you imagine he and Metcalf together
and then JSN
in the slot?
Oh,
that's crazy.
Yeah,
a guy like that.
Yeah.
The other guy that's interesting to me too, although he's more of a second rounder, is it Leggett?
Oh yeah,
the Texas A&M. Because he's a little shorter, but he kind of. Like, remember the picture of A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf standing next to each other with their shirts off, and they're just he's kind of built like that too. Like that'd be pretty crazy to see against other teams. Any other compelling thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
I mean, I think that as far as being so in the dark because it's a new regime, that if you just look on the surface how free agency has unfolded, that I think that we're going to see a much different Hawks team. I really do. And I think it's going to be a more competitive team. And I think it's going to be a team that's hungrier than what we've seen the last 3 or 4 years. I think that, the shtick, if you will, had kind of gotten old and, didn't really motivate and inspire the guys the way it did at the beginning of Pete Carroll's regime. And I really am going to enjoy watching not only the rest of the offseason and the draft, but I'm really going to enjoy seeing how this team develops throughout the season.
Yeah.
It's going to be what I really think is going to be if you're looking to enjoy the season to its fullest as a fan, then if you really emphasize on the development and the progress that they make throughout the season, then it's going to be a really good season, really fun season. I do.
Because I know you and I agreed, and I know there's a lot of fans out there that I've talked to that agree too, that and John Schneider even said it in his first solo press conference, said they underperformed last year, that team should have been better given the talent that was on the roster at the time. And it just wasn't. It just seemed like Pete Carroll had lost his way. Like he literally sometimes in his coach's show on Monday after the game, it just sounded like he was searching for answers. Trying to figure it out, and he couldn't. And so to go into ownership and try to pitch a plan to them when he'd been doing it for 3 straight years without producing results, and in fact the defense was getting worse each year, was, to go out and literally hire the guy that has been called the Sean McVay of defense, that now all these other teams in the NFL are taking his scheme that he took from Wink Martindale and adapted it on his own and went and perfected it at Michigan and then took it to the Ravens and ran with it. Now all these other teams, that's like the new West Coast offense on defense. It's like, and we got that guy. And he also is known as a teacher and a communicator and someone that players love to play for. And then he went out and hired a bunch of coaches that all kind of come with that same scouting report, like they're teachers, know? And so hopefully these like silly dead ball penalties and missed assignments and things like that, we just won't see those anymore, which is then going to make the team seem like it's more talented. So those outsiders that look in from other teams, or just the fair weather fans that just think that we have a talent issue, I would push against that. I think the talent's there.
Execution issue. Preparation issue.
Putting guys in the right position to succeed and scheming right and disguising it. Like, what if all the things that have pissed us off the most about the defense the last 5 or 6 years, they're vanilla. They don't disguise coverages. They don't play enough man. They don't blitz enough. Mike Macdonald does the opposite of all those things.
I know.
He's all about subterfuge and disguise, and you don't know which linebacker's the Mike and which one's the Will, and you don't know, whether we're going to play,
where we're going to attack you from, how we're going to attack you,
who's coming and who's not, and it's fascinating to me, and I can't wait to see. Again, I really don't care what the win-loss record is, because I'm just going to be watching more than I can remember in a long time, just play to play.
Yeah.
What does this team do? And it might, early on, it might not look great.
Yeah.
There might be moments where it's like, people are looking at each other and we're like, oh shit, I hope this works, because it might take a while. It took a good half season when he went back to Baltimore for that defense
to click.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It kind of took them going out and getting Roquan Smith too. It wasn't that great at the beginning. So I hope people are understanding of that and are a little bit patient.
They won't be, but then once it does click, they'll bandwagon back on.
Yeah. I do too, and I think that the style of play and the identity that McDonald says he's going to build, if they succeed, that's the kind of identity that stadium's going to be like it was 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
We're getting after the passer again, and we're stuffing the run, and we're making plays on defense again, and not having to sit there in our seats and watch these long drives by the opponents over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, I think that crowd will bounce back.
Oh, absolutely.
Fast.
It's I heard someone coin the phrase, it's playing up on your toes again and not on your heels.
Yeah. Let's end on this. Yes. The announcement that Blitz is retiring as the Seahawks mascot was absolutely an April Fool's joke.
Yes.
Yeah. You can rest assured. You heard it here first. I did have a question about defensive linemen. Would you take Newton or Murphy or trade back? And then somebody else up here asked about Newton or Murphy too. I probably the first 6 weeks of this draft season, I sent you enough mocks for you to know.
Yeah.
I prefer Murphy over Newton. The longer arms. I think he's a little more stout at the point of attack, where Newton's a little bit more of a penetrator. I absolutely love them both, especially Murphy, but kind of allowed my opinion to be swayed by something Brandon Kane said on the show last week, in that those guys are pure 3 techniques. Yeah. And right now, even though long-term, I would love to have them on this roster, that's a pretty deep defensive line group now. And I don't think there's a role for them to contribute as rookies. And so I think the impact on the offensive line, forget about what you think John Schneider said 2 weeks ago about offensive linemen being under or overvalued. He wasn't saying they're not important.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's the biggest impact. When I take Murphy or Newton early, then you can get value at guard in the third, but it's not slam dunk.
No.
No,
it's not.
It's, but I guess the flip side of that coin is that, and it does make it interesting, is when you take Barton or Fautano, you take that slam dunk guard in the first, By the time you come around again in the third, there's no tackles left.
Nope.
At all. Like they're all McKinley Jackson, and I know they're visiting
they're all gone.
Christian Boyd, but those guys aren't. They're not sure things,
Not even close. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not going to be mad if they take Byron Murphy because that means they have a role for him.
Yes.
I think he's an ass kicker.
Yep.
But I don't think it's a priority. All right, man. We should probably wrap this up, huh? Go eat some pizza and some lasagna.
Oh yeah. Get some kids to bed.
It sounds like they've wound down a little bit.
They have. The crisis was averted. They were digging into candy. That was the crisis. I was like, oh no, we are not doing sugar at 9:00 at night.
Well, I appreciate them making a guest appearance on the show. I always love those guys. Say hi to them for me. And
of course.
As always, here let's do a little outro music here. That's Erik Briggs. I'm Dan. I'll be back. Let's see. Tomorrow, if you're watching this Monday night, tomorrow morning, Michael Thompson and I recorded a show today where we did dueling mock drafts where he takes a quarterback, I don't, and we see how that looks. And then we did a mock draft simulator together where we traded back. So that's kind of fun. And then on Wednesday, Jackson Bevins of Cigar Things, we're finally catching up, got our schedules together. So I look forward to that. And Erik will be back on the show again before the draft for sure. So
thanks for having me.
Enjoyed it, buddy.
Hey, go Hawks, baby!
Mariners won 5-4. They moved to 3-2 on the season. They're a half game back of the Texas Rangers in the AL West. They're in
very small sample size.
They're in the race. Emerson Hancock with the win tonight.
Oh, nice.
There you go.
Good.
All right. Dom Canzone with a massive 3-run homer.
Ooh.
All right. Good to see you. Thanks brother. Everyone for watching. We have 214 people right now. I think it got up to about 220. Really appreciate that. Look for all the links in the description for all the ways you can support the show. Until next time, forever and always, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.